We're also very excited about taking leadership on other problems that we see out there, including being really strong, calling out and acting against Biden's border crisis. And we've seen this going on. And he comes into office, he opens the border, he reversed all the policies under the Trump administration. And what do you get? You get millions and millions of people coming across the border illegally. I sent people to the border, our law enforcement, and these people coming in, I mean, you know, there's people from the Middle East, there's people from Africa, there's people from China. They've had in the last fiscal year almost 100 suspected terrorists come across the southern border. These are DHS figures, so there's probably a lot more. And you know, and you see all these different problems. They don't care, though, that millions of people are coming across illegally. They don't care that the cartels are making a fortune off what they're doing and that they're eating our lunch at the border. They care about that. They don't care about the record amount of fentanyl that's coming into this country and that's causing families to lose loved ones in numbers that we haven't seen before. They don't really care about that. They didn't care. There were 50 migrants that were found dead in a trailer in South Texas. You didn't hear very much about that. And of course, when criminal aliens get in, you don't ever hear a lot about that. We had a deputy sheriff in Pinellas County, Florida, that was killed last month by a twice deported illegal alien who came across Biden's open border, broke in 6 months ago. And so you see what happens. And Biden has flown all across the country in the middle of the night. One of the people he flew into Jacksonville later committed a murder in Northeast Florida. So they don't get upset about that. They don't. They only get upset if you send to D.C., New York, or Martha's Vineyard. And why is that? Because the elites in our country that are running this country into the ground, they want to impose policies on you, but they do not want to have to suffer the consequences of their own policies. And Martha's Vineyard advertised as a sanctuary jurisdiction. Their social services office on the island said, all welcome, come here for help. And they had these border towns have thousands and thousands that they have to deal with. They had 50, one of the wealthiest places in our country. They deported them the next day. So it just shows you that we've got some problems in our country, and we highlighted this issue more than anybody else has been able to highlight. It's now a major issue. They didn't want to talk about it. And it's part of, I mean, you got to maintain control of your own country. It's just a fundamental thing of the rule of law. But, we have a breakdown in the rule of law all across this country right now. They will do things. They attack law enforcement for years, saying to defund law enforcement. They had the rioting in Minneapolis and then all over with the George Floyd riots. I'll tell you, in Florida, when that was going on in Minneapolis, I called out the National Guard immediately. I was not going to let it happen here. No way. But they've attacked law enforcement. They've slashed funding all across the country, and predictably, you have more and more crime that happens. And so in Florida, I said none of that is acceptable here. So we've signed legislation banning local governments in Florida from defunding the police. We've also signed legislation to say, I am not going to let a city in Florida turn into like Portland, where they riot all the time. They get arrested, they take a mug shot, and they go out and do it all over again. No, in Florida, because we signed legislation to be tough, if you riot, loot, you engage in mob violence, you're not getting a slap on the wrist, you're going to jail. And to make matters worse, jurisdictions like Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, they are not only attacking law enforcement, they are electing prosecutors, usually funded by people like George Soros. And they elect, they get these prosecutors in, and the prosecutor says, oh, I don't like our criminal justice system. I want to reform it. And so their idea of reforming it is to nullify laws they don't like. So in San Francisco, this guy even got recalled out there because it was so bad. He said, I am not going to prosecute anybody for theft unless you steal more than $1,000. Well, what happened? All the thieves go to the stores and they steal $950 worth of stuff. And the stores go out of business and you start breeding more and more crime, and the inmates, sure enough, start to run the asylum. In the state of Florida, we've made it very clear, prosecutors have to enforce the law. They cannot be a law unto themselves. And when we had an example of one that thought he could do it, we took action, and we made sure to hold that prosecutor accountable in the state of Florida. You know, another thing we've been really tough on with law and order, so you're never going to solve the fentanyl crisis if you have an open border, because the cartels are making a killing. And, you know, China is making this and bringing it through Mexico. You know, China, you know, they lied about COVID. They did all that stuff. They're doing the fentanyl. And yet Biden won't hold them accountable for anything. They just get away and do whatever they want. But the cartels are bringing it in through the border. And so you got to solve that. But what can we do in Florida to help? We actually launched a great treatment initiative. We've got a number of people to try to stabilize people who've been addicted. We have 500,000 of the Narcan, where if someone is overdosed, they give it. Actually saves them. So first responders have gotten that and everything. And we also said, we're going to raise penalties for people who are trafficking fentanyl and fentanyl analogs. Because because what happens is you'll have like a family, you know, maybe they have like a 16-year-old daughter and they go out and maybe she does some stuff. But, you know, there could be such a little amount of that in something, and the margin for error is like nothing. You could just overdose. It's not like, you know, you shouldn't be doing any of this other stuff, but it's much more lethal than some of the other things that particularly young people have done in the past. And so there's families have these great kids. It's not like they're getting in trouble all the time. Maybe they make one or two bad decisions, and then all of a sudden they're having to bury one of their kids. And so we can't allow it to happen. So the penalties are now severe. And what we're saying is, if you are trafficking this poison in our communities, then we are going to treat you like the murderer that you are.